My guest today on the Resonate podcast is Phoebe Leona. Phoebe is an author, dancer, yoga teacher and guide who helps people feel more embodied through somatic movement and expanded awareness practices to become more empowered in who they are becoming, and have a greater sense of belonging. Phoebe has been a teacher and guide for over 20 years, but it was after a year of extreme loss that she found herself in the vast open space in between her old life and a new life. And that is when she set up her company, nOMad, to help others through their own transitions and spaces in between. Welcome, Phoebe. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so pleased that you've been able to come on my podcast in its new iteration, the Resonate podcast. I would love for you to talk a little bit about some of what you did with your podcast, because this could be a way to let everybody know that it's okay to tune inward to decide what you're going to do at different times and not just think we need to, keep going with things we start. So tell us a little bit about your podcast first and what happened there.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Aideen. So I started a podcast, I think it was in 2018, and it was called The Space in Between. It's still out there, out in the ether of podcast land. And I had this intention of it because I was previously that spring, I think I started in the fall, that spring I had been invited to do a TEDx. And I did not know what I was going to do with my TEDx. And actually, this is a perfect for, where you are. You're all about talking about speaking your truth and speaking with intention and what resonates with you and really stepping into the power of your story. And so when I was invited to do this TEDx, I was actually somewhat scared to tell my story, but I knew that I was being called to tell my story. My story is of being raised by my father, who was a Vietnam vet who dealt with severe PTSD. And that really affected my childhood and brought trauma to my own experience. And so I wanted to share a little bit of the story, the healing that happened when he passed away, and how it really invited me into stepping into my own story and owning my power, and inviting the person watching the TEDx and in the audience to invite them into their own role as whatever it is that they're being called into. And so when I finished the TEDx, as a performer, as a dancer, I always, you probably resonate this with as a singer, like I would feel this high of performing and thinking, there's such this level of expansion. And then after there's that low of like, okay, because then it's like, you want that all the time to a certain extent. And you went to the space of expansion and you don't know what to do with it. So I said, there was so much power and healing in telling my story and being on stage. And I danced in my TEDx as well. And it was like a feeling of coming home. And I thought, wow, if I could provide that space for other people to share their stories of their spaces in between, their transitional times, those times that look like heartbreak, that look like fear of stepping into the unknown, whatever it might be for them, whatever space in between meant for them. And I wanted to create a safe place for them to share that. So that's where I started the podcast back then. And it was really beautiful. We had a lot of beautiful people that I knew who were already in my life. They were my guests. I would do a little bit of Dharma talks as well. And I would also just randomly meet people. Like whenever I travel, I bring kind of my little setup and I would say, hey, you're really interesting. Can we sit down and have a chat? And I would just record it and I'd put it out on the podcast. So that was probably the first year or two of the space in between. And then we came into the pandemic and we weren't able to be with people because that was my only rule was we had to be sitting together in the same room. And then here's the pandemic and I was like, my only rule is done. And so what do we do? So I still felt that there was a need to share, and we had the beauty of Zoom. So we just went and brought it to Zoom. But there was something that was shifting, and I think it was more of my own internal shift and figuring, okay, I'm in my own space in between, and I'm going to communicate that with my listeners, but I also am having a hard time communicating because I just really need to look at it. So I took a break. I took a couple of breaks because I just needed to be a witness of my own inner journey of the space in between during that time. And I came back and we did probably a season, and it just didn't feel like it was clicking like it had been. That magic was a kind of gone. Mm-hmm. So I took another break. And then I came back this earlier this year because I had my own book. That was my story in 300 pages this time. And I felt like, let's have conversations around this book, how we deal with our own emotions, those, especially the shadow emotions like fear and anger and guilt and shame. And I love to just have conversations with other people who, dance with those emotions, or bring them out into the light if they haven't really been public with how they voice that. So those were the conversations earlier this year. And then I thought, okay, I need another break again. So I just allow it to ebb and flow. And, it kind of goes against the grain of, what they say in the business world is like, be consistent. But I really needed to, and I think you resonate with this because you're an intuitive voice coach, is like, I had to go with my intuition. I didn't want to keep forcing the conversations that weren't flowing for me as the facilitator of the space.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so much you've said in what you've just said. I could keep talking to you for hours about some of the things that you've mentioned. That idea of expansion and retraction as well. I think that, in the business world, especially, like if you work in sales, they're like, oh, need to increase your sales by 10% this year, 10% next year, 10%. Like there's this idea that everything is in a constant expansion. And I know the universe apparently is in a constant expansion, but the reality is, if we look at nature, we see everything in cycles. So I love that you submitted and surrendered to that feeling of change. That's not always easy. Did it feel tricky to you at the time?
I talk a lot about this in a lot of my teaching and in my book too, is that I'm dear friends with chaos. And chaos is, I think of chaos as that, what you just described, of like that expansion and then contraction. It's, there are times that there's just so much, what we say in Sanskrit and yoga, like vrittis, like the fluctuations of the mind and life. And that's expansive state, but it can also look like chaos as, and not in the best way, shape or form, just like a lot of noise. So I've embraced that ebb and flow of what chaos is. And so, yes, it does feel uncomfortable, but then I'm like, here we are again. And a lot of the work that I do in my embodiment practice, Movement 109, and the teaching that I do is really to how to feel, first of all, safe in your body, feel safe in your environment, so that when we go into those spaces of expansion or what feels like the anxiety of chaos, that we can have these tools to ground ourselves and say, okay, I am stepping into this space that doesn't feel familiar, doesn't feel comfortable. There is a mass amount of change in my life, but I know that this is safe. My body's safe. My people around me are safe, and kind of identify that to take the next step into the unknown, and then the next step, and then the next step.
For sure, because there is a need to feel somewhat safe in order to change anything, because that feeling of I can count on myself, or I can count on where I live, or that's the root chakra energy, right? And once that is a little shaken, it needs a little bit of reestablishment, and something has to kind of come back into that part of our lives, that feeling of, it's safe for me to be here. That was one of my mantras for a long time, my affirmations, I'm safe, all is well. It's safe for me to be here, because in so many ways it can feel unsafe. But if you pare it down and you look at it more carefully, you can find that safety in your own body. But not everybody can feel that, right? What do you think the challenges for most people are around that? About just like I'm here, this is my body, and I'm safe here. Like what blocks us from feeling that?
So much. I mean, one, we were conditioned not to be in our bodies from, from a very early age, especially with our emotions. When emotions come up, we were taught to clamp down on them and not feel anger because it's not appropriate, or not cry because, you don't want to look like a wimp, or whatever that story is. So first of all, you kind of ignore those emotions that are manifesting in your body. So we just sort of live up in the brain and let the body do whatever it is, illness, injury. All of those are just messengers of trying to say, hey, pay attention to me. And if we're conditioned to not feel that, then those messages get louder and louder until we do listen. So that's one reason, is that we're just conditioned to not connect to our body. The second is if we had some sort of level of physical trauma, that could be sexual trauma, that could be in a car accident, whatever it might be, we have dissociated from our body, right? We no longer feel that the body is safe because it was violated or abused in some way. So what happens is when we experience trauma, our brain actually takes us offline, right? The hippocampus takes us offline and says it's not safe to be here. And so then when we come back into a homeostasis, those memories of that moment are fragmented. And so what happens in life is if we have any sort of little trigger of that memory, we may not consciously realize it, but then our brain goes again, hey, we're not safe. And so it takes you into a hyper or a hypo-arousal state. And so that hypo-arousal state is like the numbness, the shock, the not feeling your body. But the hyper-arousal state might be like anxiety. It might be like that really high fluctuation of energy. And so you just don't feel like your body is a safe place to be. You want to leave and flee in your environment or your body and kind of numb it or something with alcohol or drugs. So there's a lot. It's, as you can see, something that I have explored.
For sure. And I'm so glad you have, because how can we truly express ourselves if we can't come back to ourselves in that way? How can we find that thing that we're passionate about, or find that thing that we want to express in the world? This is like foundation level. I'd like to express myself, but I can't be with myself, and that has to heal somehow. And so what are the steps? How do you start processing any of that?
I mean, the first step to anything is awareness, is a transformation, right? Just being aware that, oh, I don't feel safe in my body, or, oh, I don't feel safe in this relationship or situation, or whatever it might be, to first identify it, and then pause and really become that witness of being with whatever that does feel uncomfortable. And then saying, okay, well, what do I need? The next question is, okay, what do I need to feel safe again? Maybe it is talk therapy. Maybe it is doing some sort of somatic movement practice. Maybe it is working with someone like you to, speak into my truth and, feel power through my voice. You kind of look at what it is that doesn't feel safe and comfortable, and then say, not to go to the full extreme, because that might be too disorienting, but just say, okay, well, what can I feel safe in this moment right now? Do I need a person that I trust? Do I need a home that feels warm and cozy? So that outside world, right? It's you have to define what that is for you. And then you do it, right? You take that leap and you lean into that and trust it. And then you'll build that strength over time. And then you'll be able to go outside, that comfort zone will start to expand, right? You'll step a little bit outside of the comfort zone, and then you'll see, oh, this is fine, right? This is actually, now you've expanded your comfort zone. And then you step out a little bit more and a little bit more, as opposed to going all the way to the space of expansion, right? And it's oh my gosh, I'm so far out here and I have no, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm dangling around in space and time, and it's you don't feel safe out there. So you go and you contract completely into that little ball. So it's testing your limits, testing your edge, knowing your boundaries, setting up clear boundaries for yourself so that you can continue to inch your way out. I've been sitting with this idea of spiritual awakening and how we're all really waking up. I think the pandemic was a huge trigger for a lot of us. And we're all having a spiritual awakening collectively. Some are a little bit ahead of others. Some are just like, what the hell's happening here? Right? We're kind of all over the place on the system, you know, on the scale of it. But we're all having a collective spiritual awakening. And what I feel is really important for people like you and me who are facilitating, who are like maybe just a couple steps ahead of the person that we're helping. It's like not to take them so far away from their center that they can't handle it. And because a lot of what I'm reading right now in this beautiful book is like psychosis, like schizophrenia and psychotic episodes look a lot like spiritual awakening. And so if you're having this expansive state of being, like an altered state of consciousness, and you're not integrated, you don't feel safe, then it can, you know, become fragmented and become a psychotic experience. It's really fascinating. I know.
That is. And it sounds like, I know myself, I went from being in London for about a year or two and not doing well over there, but being very stubborn about that I should be there, even though I wasn't earning enough money, even though I hated my boss, even though I was only working part-time, even though I was living on a friend's floor almost, all those things. And my dad came to London and handed me these letters saying, from my family, we're worried about you. And when I came home to Ireland, I moved back in with my mom and I didn't leave the house for 6 months except to go to Mass. And then I found meditation. I found mantra meditation. I think my mother would have preferred if I stuck with Mass. But anyway, I found my way, you know. And but it's like that when you have to look at what you're doing and you realize it's not working. It's not working. And the things that I want, that I think I should be moving toward, maybe they're not what I should be moving toward. Maybe I don't know what I need. Maybe I'm not choosing my right next step. And for me, it came a lot down to not being fully accepting of exactly where I was, because I was always trying to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of where I was. And I wasn't really dealing with what was really right there. And I had to surrender, and I had to take all of those goals out. And I stopped dreaming. But that was a good thing for me, because I was so much in my dream of the future that I wasn't being in my body and I wasn't being in my reality. And from choosing to be where I was, from being, okay, what's the most simple thing I could do with my life? What can I do from my little hometown? What can I do on my little laptop from here? And where is there a start your own business course, like down the street, you know, that, and where can I get support from the government if I'm not working? All of those simple things that were of the moment helped me to gain that feeling of, yeah, I can be here, like, and I can be happy here, and not be dreaming and not be looking so far ahead. So I think so many of us go through, if it's not a phase that for a period of time, it can be this, some people are feeling it constantly, this constant self kind of questioning. Should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? Am I doing the right thing? How do you develop that trust in those choices? Like what do you say to people? Like, you'll know it's the right thing if...
Oh, that's a hard question. Honestly, because I'm still learning it for myself. And I think it is a very personal experience of how do you trust your intuition. It's first understanding what your body is saying to you, right? Like sitting here right now, I'm speaking to you. My body feels really relaxed. I feel that my voice is strong and powerful as I'm speaking these words. I'm not questioning it. I don't have like an inner dialogue. I'm just like super present with you. So that right now for me feels like truth, right? Now, if I go out and I get on another podcast after this and the person and I are not resonating, and maybe he or she's kind of like questioning me in a way that I feel like they're attacking me, then my body's going to feel contracted. I'm going to start to be like sweating a little bit, and I'm going to start to say, what the hell, why did I say yes to this person? Like and I'm going to start to feel different. And so for me, it's really being the observer of, okay, how do I feel in those safe and comfortable positions? How do I feel when I'm not? Right. And just first of all, knowing what your truth is, right? What does that feel in your body, just doing the day-to-day things, and when you're slightly outside of it? And then it's like those bigger choices, those bigger decisions to make, you can start to listen. And just like what I often say to my students is, ask a really simple, like yes, no, or like one word, a question that would receive a yes or no, or like one word statement. Right. And if you ask that question and you feel that yes, like it just lands in your body, and you decide what lands in your body is, that's it. If it says no, or if it says that one word. But if it starts to go in the head and it's like, well, but da 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 da, and these are the pros and these are the cons and da 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 da, it's like, you don't know yet. You don't know yet. And it's okay. Right. Those are the vrittis. Those are the fluctuations of the mind. And it's because it hasn't landed in your nervous system yet. It hasn't landed in your body yet. And that's okay that your intuition doesn't know yet. You need more data, right? Mm-hmm. I always talk to my girlfriends, because I'm single and I do the Bumble thing. And I'm always like, well, I'm just collecting data. Like, I'm just swiping right or swiping left, and I'm asking these questions, and I have no attachment to it, but I'm just collecting data. And it's not the data from that person, like I'm asking the questions. I'm actually collecting the data of like, oh, when I look at this person, I read his profile, or when I have these conversations, how does my body feel? Yeah. Like, how am I responding to that? Am I getting like super anxious and excited? Because I used to feel that was like, oh, it's love, it's passion. And I was like, no, that's actually anxiety, Phoebe. That's an old pattern that you feel like, yeah, that chaos that's not going to bring you any sort of constant stability, safety. And so, yeah, it's all about collecting data.
Yes, I love that. Because one thing, I'm just going to share this to our listeners. When I was learning to trust myself, someone suggested that I practice using it in a restaurant when I looked at a menu. And so I would scan the menu, and instead of reading it specifically, I would read the headings, say, okay, starters, main course, whatever. And one of them would usually, I would get I'm kind of interested in that. There'd be a bit more curiosity or something. And then I would scan the things, and actually try not to read it too carefully. Like, I would just go, and I'd go down, and I'd see if I got a little bit of an energetic, by just my energy field noticing what was on that menu. And sometimes I second guess myself, obviously, but I was getting so good at choosing things that I'd be really happy with. You know the way sometimes when you're ordering and you're like, oh, I wish I'd ordered something else. That just wasn't happening to me anymore. I was actually picking. Yeah. So, and I think you can use it as well for buying clothes. I always second guess, oh, I need a new sweater, da 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 da, I'm not sure, and I'm fussy, I don't want the fit to be wrong, da da da. So now I have to remind myself these things. I try to go, okay, is it like calling to me? Is there a yes, like a real yes here? Because if it's a maybe, I'm not sure I should bother spending the money. So that's my little take on if anybody's trying to figure this out for themselves and want something simple to practice on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I love that. And I was kind of thinking about like when I order food at a restaurant and read the menu, if I don't know it, that's really, I feel like I do something similar, but I didn't really consciously say that. But have you also noticed, for me, sometimes like I sort of self-sabotage, like I'll choose something that I know I don't want, but I'll still go for it. Like, oh, you should just try it and go outside of your box. And then it's like, I really didn't want that. And I really want what the other person got. So that's a conversation to look at too. Like, why did you do that? Why are you not going to enjoy this meal now? Anyways.
Absolutely. Because that's the feedback, right? So we're trying to trust ourselves, and we're trying to make these choices and figure out what is really true for us. And then we'll test it in different ways, and we'll make the decision for different reasons sometimes. But the feedback is what tells us that was the right approach to take or not. So that's why I try not to overthink it. I'll just go with that curious feeling. And I think when we start thinking, and that's the brain kind of kicking in, and it just, it's that left, right brain, analysis. So that's just feedback, and it's good to get feedback, and it's good to test it to know for next time, and like not to be kind of, hard on ourselves in those times. And that's how I feel, things changed for me when I started meditating, because I started to trust myself again in small ways, and very small ways, like just with simple things. And I didn't know that, I didn't feel like I needed to know. And I didn't expect myself to know, and the way I had done. I had kind of presumed I knew what I wanted. Now I'm like, I don't really know. Like, so it makes it easier for me. We've moved like in the last 2 years to Michigan, my husband and I, and we may be moving again next year. And I keep reminding myself, I don't actually know necessarily where we're meant to be. So I need to just trust my next small little step. And if it feels like the right step, and it feels like, oh yeah, and I'm curious about that step, then I'll take it step by step. Instead of having the right direction in life, I feel like I just started taking the right next steps in life, and that's paid off for me, at least. So it could be worth someone else, if some of our listeners may want to consider it as an idea. And we'd love to find out what people think as well. So if you watch this or listen, to the podcast later, let us know what you think, and get in touch with me and Phoebe. We'd love to find out more. Yeah,
I would love to. I definitely resonate with that. I think sometimes if we definitely don't know what is out there. I mean, we might have an idea of, but what has helped me in terms of trust is actually looking back and seeing those moments where I didn't know what the next step was, and I did something, right? You had to do something in order to move it through time and space, and to see that I was still good, like I was still safe. Like, even though it might have felt like a turn down the wrong, quote unquote, wrong road, I still got something out of it. I still was good. Like, I still had an opportunity. I might have had an opportunity there that I didn't even know. So that helps, like seeing the evidence of the past really helps me stay grounded in the present and say, you know what, I don't know where my next move is. And I'm in a similar place as you. Like, I don't know if I'm staying here. I don't know if I'm moving back to New York. I don't know if I'm going somewhere completely different. But I'm just like, you know what, I didn't know back then either, and I was still good. So I'm just going to be good with, like what you said, the next step, and trust that bigger thing out there is calling me, and I don't know what it is yet. Like, I hear that little voice, but I don't know where it's coming from yet. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think one thing that I found reassuring, my mentor, Kalota, who I've interviewed for my podcast previously, and she said to me, Aideen, I know you're going through big changes again, but remember, when you went through all that before, you didn't have a husband, you didn't have a business, you didn't have the resources that you have, you didn't have all these great clients. And just think of like that you're in a completely different place now going through change, and you're bringing all of that with you. So sometimes when we're going through something similar again, we can feel that it's like that, the body is remembering this fear of change, but in fact, neither of us is in the same place that we were back then. We've up-leveled in different ways, and we've gotten stronger and more understanding of others and more understanding of ourselves. So it's really, it can feel more exciting this time, because we've already proven once we can get through those things.
Yeah. I love that what you said that, because you said you were feeling triggered of the past, of, that experience that you were in before. And this is the moment. I mean, even though that wasn't labeled probably as trauma, it was still a stressful event for you, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a micro trauma. And so our body is actually responding to that fight or flight. And so that's why it's really important to do things like embodiment practices, where it's like that awareness is the transformation of going, right? You recognize that, like, oh, I've been here before. That is why I'm feeling what I'm feeling in my body. But then to witness, like you said, I have a husband now, I have a business, I have some other cushion of stability or support or resources. And I also have some resources to take care of myself. Now I have meditation, right? You didn't have meditation back then. Now mm-hmm. I can move my body. Now I can sing, whatever that tool is. It's like you can use those so that you can step and elevate or transcend to that next level.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
We've kind of come to where I normally start winding things up, but I really don't want to wind things up with you, Phoebe. And I'd love, and so I'm not going to, I'm just trusting my instincts here.
I love it. I'm fine. Wherever you want to go, I told you I'm yours.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for trusting me with that. I would love to talk a little bit more about this idea of embodiment. Now, I have a lot of people listening, probably from Ireland and places like that this word embodiment, it might be completely new to them. What do you mean by embodiment?
Yeah. I love that you asked, because I think it is also a new buzzword. The other word that I use interchangeably is somatic. And both of these are just the gist of it is being in your body. Understanding that your body is your friend, right? Because we were saying we're conditioned to not feel that. Being able to identify the sensations, the emotions, the energy, all of that is just energy, the energy that is in your body, making friends with it, seeing that it's a messenger, that it really just wants to be seen, heard, and felt. And then also noting that you have a choice in how you want to express it, or how you want to release it, or how you want to manifest something new. That's really the work that I do, and I do that primarily through movement and meditation and inquiry.
Can you...
But there's so many other ways, like you.
Yeah, and I know there's... I'd love... Yeah, you can interrupt me as often as you like. I love it.
I was just saying, and you teach embodiment too with your voice, right?
Yeah, because we can't sing until we become very present, and become present to the emotions of that we're feeling, actually, because songs are usually quite emotional. Do you have any simple practice that someone could do at home right now that would help them with embodiment?
Well, so I have this little fun acronym it's PLAY. And so you can do this anytime, anywhere. You can play anywhere you want. And so all it is just simply, P is for pause. So just pause what you're doing. L is for listen. Just simply take a moment, listen to, is there a sensation in my body? Is there a feeling? Is there a dialogue, right? Like, is the mind going in circles or all over the place? Just listening and acknowledging it. A is activate. How do you want, if you're not in a desired state of being, how do you want to feel? Right? As you're taking this moment of pause and listening, how do you want to feel on the other side of it? And then Y is just to say a full body yes, and to give whatever energy that needs to be released or manifested or activated or expressed, you say that big yes. So if I'm in a situation where I'm, driving and I have road rage and right out of nowhere, just pause, and I'm pausing that dialogue. I'm like, okay, I'm still driving. I'm listening and being like, what is this really? Where's this really coming from? That guy that just cut me off, am I really going from 0 to 10? For no apparent reason, because of this one person. It's like, okay, I'm listening to what my body's feeling. I'm feeling heat. I'm feeling rage, whatever that might be. I might be feeling adrenaline because I was scared that, I might, get in an accident, whatever that might be. I'm listening to it. And I'm also becoming aware of the bigger dialogue of why that moment was happening, right? Of why I came into that moment. And then I'm activating, I'm like, okay, I don't want to feel that anymore. So I'm still driving. I'm still not in a place where I could like fully like scream or express it. So I'm just going to take some deep breaths, right? Mm-hmm. So I start to activate that, and I'm saying a full body yes to that. So that's like kind of a little example of what you could do in that moment.
Well, I think that's awesome, because everybody needs that idea of just pausing. Mm-hmm. Just the pee, actually. If you could do that much.
Exactly. Yeah, you could just stop at pee. Yeah.
Yeah, if you do pause, it does, like, if the pause kind of implies that you're kind of tuning in a little bit as well. So I love that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So PLAY. Pause, listen, activate, say yes.
Yeah. And actually, we were just said the P, like just stop at P, that we started to laugh. And that's actually amazing that we said that, because when we have moments of fight or flight, like what I just, the description I just said of somebody cutting you off, what happens in our body is that chemicals, stress hormones or chemicals are being released in our body, like adrenaline and cortisol. And if you ever have noticed, like when dogs get in a fight, have you ever seen dogs get in a fight and then when you tear them apart, they go off and they like pee on something? Right? It's one, yes, like we're always like, oh, they're marking their territory. Yes, they are. But also what they just did was they had these chemicals to keep them in that fight mode. And then they were like, okay, that's over. And they went and they released the chemicals through their urine. That's why we sweat too. So also to acknowledge when we're in those moments where we can't fully express it, those chemicals are still being flooded through our system. And we have to give it an outlet. Like we have to let it out through screaming. We have to let it out by shaking out the body, whatever it might be for you, so that we can kind of release that story. Right.
Well, that's also a good excuse if you're in and if you're in a situation with other people, you could say, hey, I just need to use the restroom. Mm-hmm. That gives you your moment of pee, pause, or pee, use the loo.
Exactly.
Apologies if anyone's offended by our toilet talk. So tell us a little bit about the ways that people can connect with you, Phoebe, and work with you, or do embodiment work with you. What kind of services do you offer?
I love this question, because you and I had a personal conversation about this yesterday, and how we offer so much to the world because we're both so passionate about what we do. The easiest way is to just go to my website, my name, PhoebeLeona.com, and we can work privately together, working on this embodiment practice of identifying what it is that you're presently going through in your life or an actual experience in your body. They usually mirror each other. They often, or almost 100% mirror each other. You might just not be conscious of it. So I love facilitating that space with people. So that's one way. And I do have a book. My book, Dear Radiant One, came out earlier this year. By the time this airs, it'll be almost a year ago. And that's my memoir. And it's also practices that helped me through my own healing journey. So there's that, and that's also on my website. And then there's lots of other experiences like retreats and online programs, and you just go to my website and dance around there and see what resonates with you. And if you're still not sure how you want to work with me, but you feel connected to, just send me an email. We can get on a 30-minute call and see what feels good.
That's lovely. Because it is one thing to figure out what resonates within us ourselves, but then when we get, I think when I started to really trust myself, then I started to connect with people differently. Like I started to know who it was I wanted, say, to have on the podcast, or who I wanted to, get support from, or what, massage therapist I wanted to go to. And I think that's really, that's part of this journey, is starting to trust your choice and starting to trust that, maybe it is worth your time and your money to connect with someone if that feeling is there within you that it would be beneficial. And if we can stop second guessing ourselves in those situations, I think we can evolve a little quicker. Yeah.
And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you, because have we known each other for 2 weeks? Something like that. We met in a serving circle, and it took a little time to meet, but that is your superpower. What you just said is your superpower of being present with yourself and trusting who to connect with. And you have, for me, been this angel of connecting me with really beautiful, beautiful people, including yourself. So just thank you, and want to acknowledge you for that. So you're doing good work, trusting your intuition.
Thank you.
I do say so myself.
And it all comes down to practicing it. It really does. If anybody's wondering, how do you do that? You just have to practice. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the listeners before we wrap it up?
I think just landing kind of where you just said is, it's the practicing the intuition. It's echoing what we said today of being safe in who you are now, in your body, in your environment, your situation, and then just testing your edge and building that trust and testing that edge and continuing to practice it, continuously showing up for yourself, continuously not knowing what's out there, but know that there is something out there for you and with you. And just echoing what we said already.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Because I really feel that each of us has such a significant life, however insignificant it might feel to us. We are all important, and we all have something. We all have something, even if it's a conversation or a smile or a note that you write to someone. We all matter in different ways. And I just love the work you do, Phoebe, and I encourage any of our listeners to connect with you or to do that play exercise. Now I'm always going to laugh now when I think of it because of the way the conversation went. I love it. And, being fun, and even that idea of being playful is something I talk a lot about in my work, because when we're playful, it's like we activate more of our mind and our hearts, and we take our pressure off. We're not being as self-critical, and that allows a lot of good things to happen. So try the play exercise, be a little playful, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Resonate podcast. Thank you so much, Phoebe, for joining me.
Thank you, Aideen.
Bye-bye.